Welcome to 90 Minutes to Close the Loop. I'm John Paul Judson, and you are watching episode 8 of the Close the Glass Loop web series dedicated to glass collection and recycling. And we start our third season on the topic of brands in action, extended producer responsibility, and beyond. Brands are responsible. First and foremost, they are responsible towards consumers to ensure that their products are safe for consumption and meet the quality standards that they put forward in their marketing campaigns. That's already something, especially when operating on a global and industrial scale. But since the 1990s, brands are also responsible for some of the externalities generated by the products they place on the market, and importantly for us, the packaging they use and how it is disposed of. There is a legal and financial responsibility, which is known as extended producer responsibility, and this has been transferred to extended producer responsibility organizations that we work with a lot inside Close the Glass Loop. And in the case of glass, there even exist dedicated schemes for glass packaging, for instance, in Italy, in Spain, in Austria, or in Sweden. But today, we will be exploring how brands go further than transferring their responsibility. What are the internal logics at play within a brand that might inspire or drive change within the value chain they operate in or directly with consumers? Because brands go beyond their products. Brands are also representing and promoting values, which of course are intended to connect consumers with the product. But at the same time, they do also represent lifestyle choices or a specific perspective on the world. So that could also have an effect on collection and recycling. So during the course of this episode, we'll be having a conversation with two brand representatives, and I really encourage you to get stuck in to this conversation via the chat. I'll be keeping an eye out for your comments, your questions, and I will be raising those with our guests. So we'll kick off with two short presentations, and then we'll be having a free conversation for about an hour. And after that, something new to kick off this third season. We'll invite you to join the networking session so that you can exchange views amongst each other on what you've heard. And who knows, maybe you can create some interesting connections for your projects on glass collection and recycling. So, without further ado, I would like to invite our first guest to the floor. I am joined by Tina Robertsson. She is Director, Sustainable Performance Absolut Vodka at the Absolut company. Welcome, Tina.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here, and I love to talk about this subject, and I think it's even easier when you have friends all around you.
You certainly do, and even if we're online, there are plenty of friends in this room, in this online space, eager to hear about some of your plans and ambitions on glass collection and recycling. So, Tina, over to you.
Thank you. Let's see. There's my presentation. Yeah, my name is Tina Robertsson. You heard that. But I can say a couple of more words around this. I've been working for this company almost 20 years now. And quite many of those years has been around sustainability, environment, but also quality, food safety, and laboratory and all those things. So I think I have a quite good view of the importance that everything and every aspect is taking into consideration. But let's talk a little more about the brand. This is our home and our community. And I just want to show this is actually the village I'm living in, and many of the people working for Absolut is living very closely to this plant. And yeah, Absolut is in Sweden, in very south of Sweden. And not just my home and the people working here, is also the home for Absolut Vodka. As you see, it's a very famous silhouette. It's an iconic glass bottle because not just is it a perfect vodka, but it's also in a perfect glass bottle. So a little more about us. It started in 1979. And it was very small brand from the very beginning. And we started to export to US. And still, since like we started with just hundreds of bottles, we are still just produced in Aarhus in Sweden. So every drop is still coming from here. And we are also call it one community and one source due to that all the raw material is coming from very close by, from the very, very south part of Sweden. All the raw material winter wheat is coming from here. We have our own water from our own wells, and almost all the glass is coming from Arda, Limmared in Sweden. Last year we produced 150 million bottles, and that is around like 4 to 5 bottles a second that is sold and consumed. Around 130 markets all over the world. I usually say this to Swedish when I'm presenting Swedish people, that wherever you go, you can find an Absolut bottle. And that is like feeling for us like home. But I think it's maybe if you know the brand, also see us all over. And the interesting thing also is that 99% of what we are producing are exported. And it's actually Sweden's single largest food export. And we are the world's 7th largest spirit brand. And we are within Pernod Ricard Group. And this is also very important for us. And it's a great company to be owned by, because they also have a very strong S&R strategy. So the sustainability and responsibility strategy is the one you see on the right. It's called Good Times from a Good Place. And as many companies today is of course checked, so the sustainable development goals are taking into consideration to see that we are covering everything and all the aspects that our company could affect. And of course, the part that we talk about today is included in the circular making part. But for us, I'm not sure if you can see this so well, but for Absolut, we have a very strong ambition. We want many things to happen to 2030. And to be able to say what we want to do, we made this visual to show that our responsibility is like the whole value chain. And this is what's all about when we call the glass loop to close it, because this is what we want to do also. We are showing on the left side more the local streams. It's about water, it's about our byproduct, the stillage, it's about the wheat, it's about the things that we could more closely work with here. The middle part is the heart. It's us and the production. But on the right side, you see the global part. Everything that's happening, the distribution, the transports, the packaging, and also recycling is covered there. And the fourth part we are working with is sustainable agriculture. It's about circular water use, climate neutrality. We want to have, or we will have, a climate neutral product to 2030. Covering the whole value chain. And then we come to circular material use. And there is where packaging becomes a very important part. How can we see to that our packaging is reused or recycled? So that is more to come around that. Let's see here. This is actually a slide that I often use when I present our brand and how we feel about glass. There's many aspects about all packaging material, and of course with glass too, and we know that, all of us. But I think it's also very important to remember that glass is inert. It's a beautiful package, and it's also very good for vodka. Vodka is actually a solvent, and it needs to be in a packaging material that is strong and it's very food safe in that way. And the thing I always say many times is to remember that glass can be recycled over and over again. And for us, this is also very important because we want to add as much recycled glass content as possible in our bottle. And today we have 53%. If you used to work with packaging that is green or brown, you think that maybe that is not so good. But to still have a clear bottle as we have and have as high content as we have, it's actually, it needs to have a very good quality of the recycled glass. And I also try to get the message out that this is not just about material, it's about climate too, because you can reduce the carbon emissions quite much if you have a high color rate in your packaging. And then we come to, of course, to say you have this ambition to 2030, you need to have a plan. And I know this is small, and it's not meaning that you're going to read in this, but we have a plan too. To be able to achieve that, you need to have a plan and actions. And we also need to know what we can do in what way. And Pernod Ricard, they have what they call the Global Sustainable Packaging Guideline, including different kind of packaging material, but also glass. And in the group, they are striving to reach 50% recycled content when it comes to clear glass. And they are working very hard with this too. And you just take one part out of this roadmap, and that is that we want to increase the color rate even more. But I think we will come into that when we talk later on, but it's of course depending on availability. It's depending on design. It's also about quality, and not least the lead content. So this was very, very short introduction of the Absolut vodka brand and the vodka with nothing to hide. So Jean-Paul, I think that was all for now.
Thank you so much, Tina, for taking us through these ambitions. And indeed, I mean, we'll be going through some of the actions that you're taking during the conversations. This is but a teaser. So thank you, Tina, for the teaser, and we'll get back to you in a few moments. Now I would like to then invite to the floor our next guest. This is Tim Moerman. He is Sustainability and ESG Director Europe at AB InBev. Tim, welcome.
Good afternoon, Jean-Paul, and thank you for having me. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, Tim. So, indeed, before we go into a deeper conversation with yourself and with Tina, let's also then hear it from you at AB InBev on what some of your ambitions are. And if we can't get you to click through your own slides, we'll help you with that, and you can just give us a next slide, okay?
Perfect. Thank you,
The
Jean-Paul.
floor is yours, Tim.
Very excited to be talking a bit about our sustainability journey, and also specifically what it means for packaging and for glass, right? So we're a beer company, we're a global beer company, which means that we're very much reliant on packaging, on natural ingredients, on raw materials all over. And we know that for that matter, actually, we also have to protect and preserve the natural environment that we operate in, right? So very much also like Tina's product, our product is rooted in nature. And so we know that we need to take care of nature for the long-term sustainability of our business. I'm going to give a bit of a brewer's perspective on sustainability, but more specifically actually on packaging, what it means for us, what our ambitions are, what our goals are, what have we been working on, and what's the roadmap ahead of us. Because however much we're proud of some of the projects and the progress so far, we know that the road ahead is long, and there's challenges for some of which where we don't have the answer to, right? And that's something I think that I'll be very keen to discuss. I'm not sure, are my slides visible? Yes, perfect. Thank you very much. Actually, now I've managed to get into the control. So if this works, you should be able to see the second slide. So a brewer's perspective on circular packaging, right? And on packaging sustainability, I think it's very inherent and specific to our category. I think that we're lucky we have a lot of our volume in returnable packaging, right? And we know from a carbon perspective, from a sustainability perspective, returnable packaging means a big deal, right? So these are kegs, these are glass bottles that come back time and time again, and it's something that we're proud of. It's something that we foster. It's something that we really cherish, and that also we know a lot of consumers and a lot of markets are very used to. Obviously, that's not the case in all the markets where we operate, but it's something that it is inherent to the category and inherent to beer. Of course, circularity just goes beyond looking at the packaging type, the packaging mix, the emissions of packaging, etc. Any sustainability strategy should be focused and rooted in your materiality assessment. And for us, if you look at our operations, if you look at our product and our category and the beers that we brew, we know that basically there's a mix and an interaction between water, carbon emissions, and then also the sustainability of the packaging. And these three, you see them basically as being our top priorities together with circular economy there in terms of what matters to the company, what matters to the community, if you will. These 3-4 parameters also closely interact and are interlinked with each other, right? So some packaging uses a lot of water, for instance, in the production. We know also that there's a big link between our packaging emissions and our overall emission footprint. So we know that certainly if you're looking at scope 3 emissions, that circular packaging will be part, and the future of packaging, if you will, and closing the glass loop and closing the packaging loop will be part of the solution. We've set ambitious goals for 2025, and there's 2 goals, and then basically linked to the circular packaging piece that I would like to highlight. The first piece is really on circular packaging, right? So if you talk about closing the glass loop, we're talking about having returnable packaging or packaging with a majority recycled content. And we know certainly, and I was listening carefully when Tina was mentioning about the Flint bottle and how it's tougher to get a high recycled content percentage in these bottles. We have a mix, a variety of bottles. Of course, if you see, I'm here in the Corona room in our offices in Leuven in Belgium, and you could actually tell that a lot of the Corona bottles, obviously, that we have are Flint. So majority recycled content is something that we're actively working on, certainly on Flint bottles, right? So what can we even do more to go beyond that 50%? For amber, green, and other colored bottles, it's easier to get to higher levels of recycled content, right? So we have a global ambition for 50% recycled content in all our primary packaging by 2025. Today already in Europe, we're way ahead of that target for the reasons that we also will be discussing in this session, right? Because of historical reasons of having actually very good collection and recycling systems in place, with an EPR kind of landscape that has been around for a while and where there's active participation of the industry to make it happen. But packaging doesn't stop there. You don't only close a glass loop because of raw materials, because of recycled content. It's very important to close a glass loop also because of emissions, right? So if you look at the carbon intensity of our packaging overall, it's nearly 40% of our full emission footprint. If you look at the scope 1 and 2 and 3 emissions of our company. So it's something to be aware about. We didn't only think about the short term, if you will, so the next 3 years and the 2025 goals that we're aiming to achieve at a global scale as AB InBev. We're also looking beyond that, right? Again, coming back to the point of packaging and emissions, net zero and decarbonization of our supply chain is critical and paramount to us. So not just going to climate neutral, carbon neutral, where we would be offsetting emissions. We really want to reduce, and we need to reduce these emissions drastically over the years to come, because we know it's not so much the emissions that we will have left in 2040, 2050 that will dictate the impact of climate change on the world, or the further impact of climate change over the world. It's really the pace of decarbonization and the culmination or the combined CO2 emissions over the next 15 years that will be even more critical than the levels we get to ultimately. So that's very important that we decarbonize, and we want to decarbonize further and faster than basically even what Paris Agreement is telling us. How do you decarbonize? How do you make packaging more sustainable? we've wrapped our head around that, because we obviously package a lot of beers at a global level, and we're very much reliant on packaging. We're very much reliant on cans, but even more so on glass bottles at a global scale. The glass bottle is so inherently linked to beer and to the ritual of drinking, right? Just think about the lemon in a Corona bottle. It's basically one and the same. And it's very important for the purpose. It's very important for the protection of the product. It's very important for the consumer experience. It's very important for many good reasons. But obviously, we need efficient packaging, we need optimal packaging, and we need low carbon packaging, right? So we have been working on low carbon packaging solutions. It's something that we would love that we will be working on together with our largest suppliers for sure in the years to come. We have a platform which is called Eclipse, which basically is the platform that we use to decarbonize our supply chain. We're lightweighting. We have developed the lightest beer bottle in the world. Last year we did already announcements, I think the year before. Basically that is something that we're rolling out, scaling now globally, which is very important to us. Reusing, right? So reusing not only in terms of the returnables, but also the recycled content, close the loop, get back the glass into the new bottle. Creating new supply chains on collection and recycling, very important to us. I think we're all lucky, and certainly the people on the call who are living in Europe, to have very good collection and recycling systems. But it's not everywhere. And we know at the same time there's challenges also with the European systems for sure in some markets. And then also rethinking waste, right? So how can we, for instance, this basket there that holds six Corona bottles, it basically is made from barley straw, right? So we use the barley that is malt, goes into the beer, but the straw we're using basically in new solutions we can use actually to make baskets. This is a crate. This is a Corona crate that we launched in Germany last year. It has a number of benefits. First of all, it contains bottles, right? It keeps the bottles safe and stored. It's also a way for consumers to carry them and to get them home safely, to get them back ultimately in an ideal case. And then this bottle crate specifically is made from almost 100% recycled plastic, but also from marine waste, right? So we're going to talk about consumer perception most likely today and how consumers deal with collection and recycling. This is a key enabler. Another one is, for instance, Perfect Draft, right, which brings an in-home experience to people in a reusable pack. Jean-Paul, I think that was it in terms of a presentation, if that makes sense, but I'm very keen to go into Q&A and the discussion with Tina, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it makes sense. And thanks also then for sharing this global overview. I think it's important that we kick off this conversation with a sense of where you're coming from as a company, and then we'll try and go a little bit deeper into some of the more specific actions linked to glass collection and recycling. So thank you, Tim. And yes, let's have Tina join us then on stage. So that way the three of us are here. Hello, welcome back, Tina.
Thank you.
So I would like to start this conversation with the consumer, because obviously that's what I asked, that you give us a broad company overview, and so you focused on some of the goals that you have as a company. But I'd like to go back to the consumer, which is the one you are serving in the end. And as you're representing also they're two beverages, but they're two quite different beverages. I would say, the beer would be typically a beverage that you would consume relatively quickly, let's say within minutes or something like that on average, whereas the spirits would be rather something you might consume over days, months. I'm not sure what an average would be, but let's say for a moderate consumption, that would be a good timeline. So they're products you consume differently. Do you feel that affects the kind of priorities consumers might have when looking at that product, and the kind of expectations they might have on companies that you're representing when placing those kinds of products on the market? Do you think there is a difference there? Maybe Tina first.
Yeah, I believe there is, because when you have and you are like consuming in your house, if you're in a country where it's like a mature country when it comes to recycling, you often have the possibility to put it in a recycle bin at home, or where you could go to put it. It's not a guarantee, of course, but I think still there is a better possibility that our bottle ends up in the recycle system. But it doesn't matter. even though we need to really work hard to see to that our bottles are ending up there.
So you're saying that the bottle would be typically consumed in a household setting over a long period of time. So that would have an effect on the relationship of the consumer with the disposal of that packaging. Do you agree, Tim? What is your view on that?
I guess the package. I fully agree, right? I think the packaging has, or there's two almost life stages, if you will, of the packaging that are important to look at from a brand perspective, from a consumer interaction perspective. The one piece is obviously the buying and the consuming, right? So how convenient is it to carry a packaging? How much does it weigh? What is the consumer preference? We just know that a lot of people like to drink beer from a bottle, right? So that's one piece of the discussion. What does it mean for on the go versus off trade, right? So if you think about supermarkets versus maybe a festival or an event or when people are commuting, etc. So that's I think one piece. Size of the bottle is an important piece, right? So certainly in beer, we have a very strong smart drinking agenda as well. So we're very adamant about that, about the size of the bottle and how we kind of serve on an individual level. And then there's a second pillar that talks about for sure the return piece or the collection and recycling piece, right? So certainly with even more fast moving packaging compared to, for instance, Tina's product, we will need more collection and recycling of the glass. There's more volume going around. And also if you think about return systems, what are the carriers? How can that work at scale with also what we see in Europe? Some push at least also from the legislative level to think about return systems and certainly in markets where these are non-existent today.
So you talk about the relationship between the consumer and the disposal of the product. I'm wondering also whether the sort of consumer awareness of the importance of circularity also changes, and whether the expectations of the consumers on your products, on your packaging may be different. So they might say, well, yeah, for all the kind of beers coming from maybe InBev, they absolutely need to be circular because I consume them, let's say, on a more fast-moving basis. Whereas with spirits, it's not so much of a concern to me. Tina?
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I'm just thinking about that. We actually had a recycling campaign a couple of years ago, just to promote this, to see that our consumers, so it was like a crashed bottle that we put together again, and just to demonstrate, the importance of this. So I think it's what you say is so important with awareness. It's not just that you shouldn't throw it, on the ground or something. It's about what it can do with reducing the climate footprint, with reducing the use of more raw material. There is so many positive things if you do it in the right way. So how can we get the consumers to understand? So it's not like just keep clean, it's about so much more. So through campaigns and through make things maybe fun or easier, because we are lazy. It needs to be convenient. And do you need to go the extra mile? You will not do it. But maybe if you have the awareness, what you could actually contribute to, then you maybe go that extra mile. So we need to have both ways, easy, convenient, but also to understand, that you do something very positive.
Would you agree, Tim, that there would be a greater awareness maybe when products are consumed on a faster basis?
I think it's a combination of two things. First of all, there's basically how you interact with the consumer, right? So basically what you tell the consumer. I think on some of our brands we've been having actually very clear campaigns talking about recycled content in packaging, talking about how to return, how to recycle the packaging, and certainly in the European landscape with a lot of different member states with different kind of collection and recycling systems, different logos, etc. That's becoming, I think, ever more complex. So I think uniformity, simplicity is key. At the same time, we know that not all the member states will just tomorrow align the collection and recycling systems or logos. The second piece to that answer most likely is what we can do inherently, right? What can we bring to the point of Tina to maybe us as a consumer who is inherently potentially lazy or not informed? What can we do as brand owners, as producers, to make an impact? And that's exactly why we've put a goal on ourselves to at least have 50% recycled content in our packaging at a global level, which is, I'll be very honest, is an easy target for Europe, which is a harder target if you think about North America, if you think about some other markets, because they just don't always have separate collection and recycling. So basically what that does is us, and then as a market leader in beer, it's basically we're putting an obligation on ourselves, and we're basically telling the market that we will be procuring recycled content for our glass bottles, which then actually should trail a supply chain behind us. So even in markets without the perfect collection and recycling system, or without a deployed EPR system in place, even in those markets, we're actually trailing a supply chain along in the direction of more separate collection or sorting, and then recycling into bottles again.
Yeah, and we'll get into the systems, the governance systems for collection and recycling, but I just want to push on one more question that's coming from the audience linked to the consumer. And it's, who is responsible for the actual packaging design to some extent? Is it for consumers to tell producers, we want this kind of packaging, maybe driven indeed by convenience and laziness and things like that? Or is it for producers to say, look, we have to shape the consumer acceptance of more sustainable packaging? And that could, for instance, have an effect on sometimes, the link between primary packaging and secondary packaging and choices around that. Could anyone comment on that? Tina, want to have a go?
I can start. I think, of course, we are responsible. We need to see that our packaging is recyclable. That's basic. But of course, that could also be a challenge, because the people who are working with these designs, they want to do something very special and something new and exceptional. And I think that this is something that designers today, it's another aspect that I think they are fully aware, but at Absolut, and I think maybe in many companies today, this is a collaboration, and you need to work together, cross-functional, because sometimes it's hard for everyone to know new things coming up. It's guidelines, it's legal requirements, and we need to help each other out to say, okay, what's possible, what can be done, and at the same time, really, as you said, Tim, we think, to every time to do something, you should go even better, and to use less material. But the most important thing is that the packaging is possible to recycle. I think that is like basic. Then you can, of course, if it's possible to reuse or something, that is, of course, very good too. But it's our responsibility.
A reaction on that one, Tim?
I completely agree with that point. It's on us, right, and on our supply chain to make that happen, with the consumer preference in mind, right? So it's not something that it's really the genius of the ant, we call it. So we will need to be very attractive to the consumer in a type of packaging that he or she likes, and at the same time be sustainable. For sure, the recyclability of the packaging is kind of the baseline, and I think certainly for all the people on the call who are in glass, that's the big benefit of glass, right? That it can be recycled in basically a fairly easy way between brackets, and that it's kind of a monomaterial, which has a lot of good kind of capabilities, capacities. And I think that's an important piece. Certainly speaking about glass, the truth is, over time, that we are looking at even more sustainable glass, right? So thinking about lightweighting, recycled content, returnability, but also certainly at lower carbon in the production cycle. So that's something for sure that we're also very passionate about, very active about, and that might not even be a consumer demand today, but that we will know be a kind of a base condition for the game moving forward.
Okay, so we talked about recyclability, and there's the theoretical level of recyclability, and then there's the practical level, operational level, where materials actually get collected and recycled. And so far, most of the system has been based around extended producer responsibility, and in the case of glass packaging, mostly linked then to household packaging, household waste management, municipal waste management. So this link has been very, very strong. And so I would like to touch upon extended producer responsibility organizations and how you view those, because obviously they're a very important part of that connection between the theory and the practice. But increasingly, and there's also a comment on that in the audience in relation to, for instance, deposit return schemes, extended producer responsibility organizations and that governance system is also being challenged with other systems, all trying to get more material collected, and an effective recycling system being set up. So I'd like you also to comment on how do you view all of this as a brand? I mean, do you basically engage with this as a sort of administrative financial transaction where you pay what you have to pay and you let these organizations do their work? Or are you much more integrated into the operations of these organizations? Tim first, maybe.
It's very much the both, right? I think on the one hand, we are obviously supporting these organizations financially. We take our EPR responsibility very, very seriously. So that comes with a cost, right? And that is rightfully so a cost, I think. That helps us also basically on closing that glass loop and closing the packaging loop, which is critical. Secondly, of course, and certainly in markets with very strong EPR systems and ideally that have one EPR system to serve a whole country. We're obviously, as a big player in the markets where we are bigger, we're obviously also engaged with and directly in the EPR system. I think certainly on the collection of one-way packaging, if you think about bottle banks, if you think about even door-to-door collection in some regions in Europe, I think a lot of the EPR schemes have been doing actually a great job in organizing that and actually in a very cost-effective way and bringing back glass into the recycling flow and into the new product flow, if you will. So it's really the both. It's on the one hand, obviously the baseline, if you will, that's the financial contribution on the tons that we put into the market, which only makes sense. It's secondly also helping navigate, helping optimize, and helping improve these organizations. And to your point, Jean-Paul, in many markets, there's going to be more, maybe pressure, but maybe also more opportunity as you see more DRS systems arise.
Okay, Tina, do you also have a view on how your brand gets involved or not in extended producer responsibility organizations?
Yeah, this has been a very, very high on my agenda the last 2 years or so, because it's very interesting. I think you need to be aware also how things works. In Sweden, maybe it's more simple, of course. For us, it's simpler because we could act and do a lot of things in Sweden. And there is also where we, of course, pay our EPR. But the thing is that we have a very close contact, both that we work like in a one company with Arda and Limared, our glass manufacturer, and we have a common goal. So they know that we want to increase the cullet rate, and they do as much as they can to help us. And then we work also very closely with Swedish Glass Recycling, and has been able to make tests with our products in at their plant. So we actually closed down twice the production to put in our different types of articles with different design or decor, just to see the difference between where did it end up. Did it end up, for the clear glass fraction, or did it end up in insulation fraction or foam glass fraction? So that was very interesting to see how it works and what's happening, because that I could go back to the designers and say, if you do like that, this will happen. We were very lucky. Nothing ended up in landfill, and thank God for that. But still, it's very interesting to see how labels are affecting the the recycling process and the decor. And I think this is a way for us that we need to understand. To be able to change to something that is better, you need to understand how it works. And for us, it's a great opportunity to be able to do something like that. And we will, of course, share our knowledge, both internally and externally, because if we could help and make things better, because we need recycled glass. And as I said in my presentation, it's also about availability, because we want to have more, but maybe it's not possible. So we need to act and be a part of the solutions. And as I say, we are selling all over the world. So even though we are working and having the recycled content from Sweden, we need to see that things are going in a positive way all over the world. So we have started a lot here in the group in Panorica. They are active also, of course, from their side. But if we can contribute from Absolut, it should be great.
On your point, I was going to say, so you have a very practical example of working with an extended producer responsibility organization and a recycling facility to check the effective recyclability of the packaging you're putting on the market. But it's only in that context, let's say. It's with the infrastructure that you have there, where you're testing in Sweden. And I think that's also where it gets very complex to get this feedback loop going from the waste management sector back into the brand design aspect. Is that also something that extended producer responsibility schemes are doing? And do you let them in to your companies? Do you let them into your sort of internal meetings? And do they influence actually your packaging choices and the design choices that you make, Tim? Or are you kind of driven by the market?
But I wouldn't say it's almost none of the above, if you will, in the sense that it's not that we design products directly with the EPR systems in the room or together with the EPR systems. I think what is important for us in terms of EPR and the rollout of EPR and the operational effectiveness of EPR is to what extent that it can bring back high quality recycled content into the supply chain. And I think that's I think their first and foremost activity. In an ideal world, what we would like to see more, I guess, over time, and certainly as companies that are pushing almost on the boundaries of recycled content, what have you, is that EPR systems, as is actually foreseen in the European directives, but would even go to more modulation of the fees, right? So basically, where you don't only have the stick, but also have a carrot for the supply chain to go to more recycled content, right? Because these could actually be big drivers of sustainable innovation, because then also it basically changes business cases in companies, right? And then you will have more design teams even than today think about the sustainability of packaging, if that is also an incentive from that perspective. And we know that more recycled content and more separate collection and recycling will be a big part of the answer to the questions that we have ahead of us. So to answer your question, basically, I think and certainly we have our actually global research and innovation center just here also next to Brussels in Leuven. We do a lot of packaging innovation, not with the EPR systems in the room, but they play a big role, I think, in the success of a lot of the innovations, and they are a key instrument to making more sustainable packaging happen for sure.
Because you do need to have this global overview and an understanding of each market, not just as, what do the consumers want in that market, but also what are the kinds of infrastructure available, what are the kind of technologies are we using. There's, for instance, a question in the audience related to labels. So specifically, so for instance, cullet can be lost to the stream, to the recycling stream, because labels are fixed very hard on the glass. I don't know, maybe in some other market the technology exists to completely separate that label, and therefore there's no problem. So you're dealing with a very moving environment, a very dynamic environment, a very different environment in every single geography. And I'm just trying to understand as a brand how you apprehend that, and even more so, how do you apprehend that when speaking to your designers, who will be probably having intense pressure to come up with, the right product for the market, for the consumer. So that's probably also where your role fits in as well, somewhere in the middle there. I'd like to understand what it means for you to be in that position, Tina.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's about passion too, to understand that you can do something that is really good for the environment and for the future, and have the common goal. I think that is again, the baseline to understand the importance. And then I also see that countries, many countries are coming with different legal requirements around packaging now. It's not just EU was very clear how you should think and act. And actually, I think that's good because that puts pressure on us. But at the same time, the more I learn about what's happening and how it works, I also see that sometimes they put requirements that actually is maybe not the best, because everything is evolving, and I think you need to be also looking to be able to change. And sometimes it could be little stiff, and square. But I think, again, the more you know, the more you can explain and discuss with different markets. It makes things easier. Maybe I wasn't so clear, but I think this is quite complicated. And as long as you keep as much as possible to the clear glass labels that don't have too tough adhesive, it will work fine. It worked very fine. And we tested also, different types of adhesive. I think this was almost the same result. Then you can, of course, extend this and say that you want the label to also be recycled. Then you have a different thing. But if we just talk about recycling of the glass, then I say label is not a problem.
Yeah, you raise a good point, because in a glass sorting facility, you will also be mindful of the kind of materials that are being sorted out of the glass stream, but you don't want to just send that to landfill. The people operating those facilities wouldn't want to do that, and the brands, in a way, have a responsibility for that as well. And Tim, could you maybe comment on the links that you have with glass packaging, maybe versus other materials? I'm not sure, that you don't necessarily have to compare, but when thinking about design choices in relation to glass, is the communication very direct with, let's say, glass manufacturers, but also people on the waste management side, so the glass sorting, glass recycling facilities? Is that where you're getting your information? Or is it also going through the extended producer responsibility schemes? How do you keep up to date, let's say, with the latest in all the different markets?
Sure, it's a good question. I think maybe first going back to the first part of it, right? Design thinking. How do you make something? How do you make sure that your design teams are also ingrained of what needs to happen? I think what works very well for us is that basically, if you think about our sustainability strategy, if you think about our goals that we're going after, this is cascaded and this is basically carried and covered and supported by the whole organization, right? So if you just think about literally on how targets are organized in our company, and how basically we have an encompassing and a comprehensive sustainability strategy, it's not just me, my team, our group taking sustainability targets, right? What's important is that also the people that are responsible for procurement take sustainability targets, that they share that ambition, that they share that dream. And the same thing with the people that work on innovation, right? And I think that's the first piece. The second piece is on the supplier side, right? Because of our very clear goals, our very clear ambitions, these become also part of our discussions with suppliers. It's not just that fancy packaging that we want, or the lightest bottle, or the newest bottle, or the new embossing, or what can you have. It's at the same time also sustainability goals that need to be met, and that will be part of the discussions with the suppliers. And then very specific to your question, Jean-Paul, obviously we work with a number of large suppliers at a global scale, so we know to a large extent what's going on in the market. Sometimes they are vertically integrated in terms of recycling. we also are sometimes vertically integrated in terms of production. So I think that learns you a lot. It gives you a lot of insights in the markets. At the same time, you obviously have the EPR schemes that also help us navigate new regulations, that help us navigate volumes, that help us navigate understanding of where recycling flows go. What is important though, and certainly if you look at it from a European perspective, to repeat that point, and also the point that Tina made, is that we can keep a harmonized, uniform single market. Because with what's currently going on, you might be going into markets where basically in all the member states you will have completely different labels in terms of the highlighting of what material it's made from, in terms of recycled content logos, in terms of collection systems, and the information that goes with that, right? So I think it's very important with consumers that we have clear, harmonized communication, and that we can keep serving a uniform, integrated single market in Europe as well.
Yeah, and there are indeed many changes, and I would maybe just like to come back to the point that Tina made around additional requirements that sometimes make things even more complex, because I'm not sure you actually specifically mentioned what kind of requirements came in addition. Can you just tell us a little bit more about some of those legal requirements, and maybe those that you feel go too far, just so that we understand also the requirements that you have as a brand when placing products on the market? I mean, maybe not everyone always thinks about all those different requirements that you might be facing. Tina, can you just give us a sense of that?
It could be like labels. One market had a new requirement that said that plastic labels wasn't approved anymore. And then I think it's very interesting to know why. Is it due to that it's a problem for the recycling process of glass, or is it just about plastic? So that was just an example, but it's for us, like, have this iconic bottle. We are working on. We have reduced the weight earlier. We have looked into lightweight, but we will not be able to continue to have this shoulder that we have. So we are doing as much as we can to lower the weight. But still, again, it's about quality and food safety, and that it's a sustainable bottle. So we are taking that step. But when it comes to these requirements now for packaging, you really need to say why. Why can't you have even lighter packaging? And I think that's okay, because I think it's important for us too to say why. And sometimes it's easier to have like these type of bottles when it comes to glass.
And that then comes back to the beginning of this conversation to some extent, is the way the packaging might embody the product. And I was just not so long ago looking at a range of spirits bottles, and it's true that they do remind you of the kind of packaging you would get in the perfumery sector, where each bottle has a very specific shape, and that's very embedded in the sort of consumer experience and the brand experience related to that product. Pardon me if I'm wrong, Tim, but let's say that requirement or that market trend, let's say, is probably not quite as prominent in the beer sector, although you do have lots of different shapes. There are also some slightly more standardized versions of those shapes. Maybe also a comment on that, Tim. I mean, do you think that creates a big difference in these markets, and the kind of requirements that different markets should have on their packaging, and the sort of relative circularity of the packaging?
It's a good question. I think you're right in terms of the extremes. Certainly in spirits are more off versus kind of what is more standard than in a beer category. That said, it's very important for our brands and the role that they play in society and the consumers that they serve, that there is differentiation, that basically that you have a specific bottle, a specific packaging type that talks to the occasion. Again, think about a Corona bottle compared to a Budweiser or a Stella Artois bottle, which is for us very important. Collection and recycling systems should be equipped to work with that, right? So that's one thing for sure. Most likely, certainly in markets with returnables, there you will often have a connection between also the bottle and the crate specifically. So that's also an important one, that basically that the one is made for the other, or that the bottle fits the crate, if you will. So I think while you have to allow for that differentiation, while it's important for the consumer, you want to maintain efficiency also at the collection and the recycling level. So I think it really comes down to that. To what extent does it hamper collection and recycling of the product? Is the product still recyclable? Is the key question I think that you want to ask yourself. And other than that, you want to go, of course, to efficiency in that chain, but not diluting the consumer experience. I think that's a very important piece.
And in the case of glass, there's also a comment in the audience saying that, whereas there might be problems of availability of recycled glass, other kind of legal requirements, but there can also be limits on the uptake of recycled glass because of color issues. And so you might have, a very clear bottle that you wouldn't want to, have green recycled glass going in there because it would disrupt that shade. But then you're saying, yeah, but that shade of clear has to be maintained. But there might be a bit of dialogue in that value chain to say, how picky do we need to be about our shades of color? Because that might also open up a little bit more space for innovation, for new colors, maybe. Tina, that might be more specifically to you. I mean, how clear does the bottle need to be?
And 10 years ago, it was like clear, clear, clear. Even though we had color rate to a certain extent already then, but it's changed. And it's changed so much. But still, we're so fortunate to have the possibility for this Swedish glass recycling system that is very mature and good. But when we started the next journey, 2016, we had 36%. And we were so careful, we took 1% at a time because and then after we had put in 1 more percent, there were bottles checked, from different departments, from quality, from marketing. Everyone was looking at those bottles and said, do anyone see anything, And then, it's okay. We take 1 more. And we continued like that, for maybe 45%. And then said, no, we started taking 2 at the time. And the thing is now we have taken 3 at the time in the end. So it's also about, as you say, how it's still clear. It's very clear. But still, maybe if this was 10 years ago, it maybe hadn't been too clear enough. But it's changing. The mindset, and people are more open for this. And it's something that it's okay. It's acceptable today if it's not perfect clear.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting example, because I mean, to the naked eye and of the consumer, you probably wouldn't make a difference, but for those protecting a brand and an iconic product, it might make a big difference, and that's also where I suppose your roles fit in. Would you like to mention something on that, Tim?
Yeah, completely agree with Tina. I think the dynamics are shifting, and I think the mind is also kind of maturing around this. I think that's a role that we are playing in our companies, talking to the brand teams, talking to the design teams, talking to the packaging teams. That's a role that our suppliers have to play towards us, I think, to challenge us and to think about sustainability even beyond where we thought that we would be going. And lastly, I think there's also a consumer angle to this, where people, to Tina's point, it's the bottle is still perfect, right? I think the consumer also, you can also actually take the consumer on a journey about the story behind, right? Why things are changing, why you would have, for instance, a Flint bottle that is not 100% transparent anymore, but maybe 94%, and with a bit of a color shade. Is it the end of the world? To your point, Jean-Paul, for some people it will be, and certainly there will be an adoption period. End of the day, the question really is, what does the consumer think about it? And I think there's for sure a dream that we have to go after to keep increasing, keep improving, and that's awareness that also grows in the brand teams. That's awareness that grows into the design teams, because it grows in society and because it becomes more widely accepted and more widely understood, right? I mean, there's a role for our brands. For instance, if you drink Stella Artois in some of our markets, the bottle will actually say with 75% recycled content. And so it means that 3/4 of your bottle is recycled. And that just by putting that on there, it might be kind of a technical spec almost, but people start understanding that basically the behavior that they have also influences what comes back, basically. So that's, I think, the learning there.
Great stuff. So I'd like to finish with two questions, one difficult or at least challenging, and one probably a little bit easier. We'll start with the challenging one, because there's been quite a lot of discussion in the audience, I would say mostly related, to these choices between also reuse versus one way, and it's not all about recyclability. We should also look at other systems, reusable. But there's maybe one comment that kind of crystallizes something that goes even further than that, which is, we need to move the agenda away from just recyclability. We need to shift the dial up the waste hierarchy to reduce consumption. Okay, so, and I saw it in Tim's slide, you had the reduce box. So I would just like you to comment on that. Okay, can we start with Tim? A comment on this, shifting towards reducing consumption. How do you deal with that?
Well, I think we've answered a number of or a big piece of that question, right? If you think about returnable packaging, reusable packaging, you reduce what you consume in terms of the virgin material. If you go to higher levels of recycled content, again, in Europe, we're way beyond the 50% mark in all our primary packaging. Basically, you reduce the consumption of virgin material. If you lightweight, right? Again, lightest beer bottle in the world, reduction of the weight, and actually be more effective, more efficient, you reduce what you consume. Again, I think it's the question is not even enough, right? I think the question ultimately is not about the reduction of packaging only. It's about, very importantly, about the decarbonization of packaging. And I think reusable packaging or packaging with a high recycled content that is as efficient as possible and produced in a low carbon way, that's what we need to go after. That's the future, and that's very clearly where we are focused on as a company.
Thanks, Tim. Tina, how do we move away from recyclability only and shift towards reducing consumption?
Yeah, but I would like to copy what Tim said. I think it was great. No, but it's I think everyone needs to think about where could we have some type of reusing or in different ways. We have a project also on that. But I think it's easier when it comes to bar business or restaurants and so, because when it comes to consuming as individuals here in home, it's much harder. But I totally agree with him. There is things to be done when it comes to reducing the carbon emissions. And that is something that I know the glass industry is working very hard on, and also the glass manufacturer we are working with. And of course, to have as little weight as possible in the packaging.
And there's one suggestion or question in the audience, for Tina. Have you ever thought about a refill service for your local clients in special dedicated shops for spirits? So maybe that's something to think about.
Of course you have. But as I said, we have a collaboration with the Eco Spirits that is working with this, with several brands, and Absolut Vodka is one. So that is a trial and test. We'll see if that could be a success, but it's there's many. I think still we need to have a packaging and to have the best possible packaging for the product you have. That is that is very important. And if it can be reused, and if you can have a different type of system too, that is perfect.
Brilliant. Okay, so now we can wrap up with the easy one. So now you can relax. No, but more seriously, so within Close the Glass Loop, we're trying to connect all of these dots, obviously related to the collection and recycling of packaging. We have, different sectors representing brands in different markets. We have the EPR organizations, we have glass manufacturers, glass recyclers, the HoReCa sector, municipalities as well represented. But it's not always easy to get these, connections and dialogues going. And as leading brands in your field, I would just like to ask you, what would you like to see coming out of Close the Glass Loop that can help you, bring and drive your ambitions forward? These kind of multi-stakeholder partnerships, European level, but also, really focusing on national practical actions. Where would you like to see Close the Glass Loop going to help you, essentially, because you're the ones making a lot of the changes and placing the products on the market? So the first question then let's go for Tina first.
I would like to know even more about the recycling systems also, to say, how could we be better prepared to see that as much as possible of the glass is ending up at new packaging instead of insulation or the other fractions. I think sometimes it's hard to get the information you need, and also different markets. How much does it differ? And if we could do anything else, how could we contribute?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tina, for having shared all your insights throughout this discussion. Over to Tim.
Good question. I think forums like this help to guide, but also to inform the conversation. I think that's the first piece of importance. I think with that, I think in a shared ambition and a carried ambition across the supply chain to decarbonize, to go to even more recycled content, to go to more reuse. I think that's something that also helps the conversation, I think. And then it's, I guess, most likely cards on the table, right? Because this is not our problem. This is not Tina's problem. This is not the people on the call's problem. This is something that is society that we'll need to solve, right? Because there's a whole ecosystem involved, a whole supply chain involved, both on the supplier side, on the brand side, but also on the consumer side. So I think fostering that conversation to work towards a joint carried ambition in honesty and openness about the challenges that we have, or about the things that we think we cannot do now, right? And knowing basically what the boundaries are from a technical, but also sometimes from a commercial perspective, and accepting that while keeping the ambition in mind and making steady progress is, I think, what markets and forums like this should be there for.
Brilliant. Tim, thank you so much also to you for having shared your insights. The two of you have been really engaging, very open. You've been willing to answer some tricky questions coming from the audience. Mine are not so tricky at the end of the day, but the ones coming from the audience are a little bit more so. So thank you so much. I think it's really important inside Close the Glass Loop to get these perspectives to basically galvanize the whole value chain into action, and this is why we try and do this at different times of the year, just to, keep the momentum up. So thank you for having taken part.
Thank you very much, Jean-Paul.
Thank you. And also then thank you to the audience. You've been really highly interactive. I have to say, I've been trying to follow as much as I could the different comments and questions coming in. And I think we did manage to raise quite a few with our speakers who responded openly. So that's already a good step. Bear in mind that we finished the discussion part now, but it's still 90 minutes to close the loop, and you have the next 20 minutes to go into the networking session. You've all received an email about that. You can just click networking, and you'll be able to engage with other attendees who were here with us throughout this event. Maybe you can create some interesting connections for the future. So I hope that you'll be able to jump in there and see who else is out there, and maybe it might lead to some great projects that support our ambition towards 90% glass collection for recycling by 2030. Also, importantly, we're already getting ready for our next episode that will be happening on the 30th of March 2023, and we will be discussing a roadmap for collecting HoReCa glass. So we'll be sending you the registration link. It will be open very soon, but already you can save the date. It'll be a similar format to this one, some case studies, discussion, and then some networking session for attendees. Okay, so with that, I would like to thank you and see you next time. See you in the networking. Bye-bye.